So I've been thinking over this entire Jeffrey Epstein, Donald J. Trump scandal, row, whatever you like to call it. And it seems to me that there's a very major concept in geopolitics that an average American seems to be overlooking or ignoring, or at least is forced to overlook and ignore, given the way this entire discussion has been happening in the media. And that's what we'll get to. What is the one thing that we should be paying very close attention to? It's not whether the president of United States is there on the Epstein list or not. It's something else, something very cheeky, something very sly. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let me just take you through some of the objective facts that we know as an average American. This entire discussion is based around objective facts or truths that we are aware of. We'll deduce things further, but we'll start off with the things that we know for certain as an average American to be true. Okay. So let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein, right? So what are the facts that we know about this guy? So fact number one: the guy came from, starting from his childhood, he came from a Jewish heritage. Both of his parents were, of Jewish heritage. That's point number one. What does it imply? It implies, in post 1952, 1942, 48 America, if you are a Jewish person, sooner or later the Israeli policymakers, or sorry, not policymakers, but the Israeli agencies will reach out to you, to get your cut in the promised land, right? So that's point number one, and that's what we need to infer from this point number one, that there was definitely an Israeli influence very pretty early on in his life. Okay. What's point number two that we know about this guy? He was a school teacher. So he was a school teacher. By the way, his parents also had humble beginnings. Both of his father was a gardener, his mother was a homemaker, I believe. Yeah, his mother was a homemaker, and he went on to I believe drop out of college, went on to teach in a school. So had pretty humble beginnings. Then he moved on to work in a bank. Kind of given that he was, had a Jewish heritage, so maybe he was inclined towards it. That's where he started making a buckload of money. That's where he started gaining success, and which led him to establish his own private consulting firm. Now, by the way, this is not an average success story. For a guy of such humble beginnings to make it this big in the banking industry, in the private consulting, so much so to the extent that he went on to own private jets, private islands, where he invites, these big names across America to his private parties and private pool parties, whatever you like to call it. Within a span of, let's say, 10 years, in less than 10 years, this guy makes it super big. Less than 10 years. Okay. Some would say even less than 5, but let me just be very generous here. Less than 10 years, he makes it big. Way too big. Something that takes an average guy generations to build. The kind of wealth that an average American would require generations to build, this guy builds in less than 10 years. So much so he owns the biggest house in Manhattan, owns a private island, owns private jets, has, contacts with the most elite in the American in the American public, or in the American space, and then goes on to host these what we all aware, what we know him for, these the entire sex scandal row that eventually was revealed some 10 years back. So these are some of the objective facts that we know. He had Jewish heritage. He was a school teacher, so was, I would say, a mediocre student. Went on to be a school teacher. Started working in a bank, got into private consulting, made it big in less than 10 years. Was not just big, super rich, super wealthy. Now these are all the objective facts that we are just aware of as an average American. Which leads us to a sixth fact, which I would say is a deduced one. This is a deduced fact. Okay, something that we can deduce from the first 5 points, first 5 objective truths that we know about this guy. That sixth fact is that we can say this with almost, you can, some people are certain about it, they have the documents, but because we are seeing this entire discussion from the lens of an average American, we'll call it a deduced fact that we can say that, we can say it at least up to 90% accuracy, that he had the backing of Israeli government. And when we see Israeli government, we mean Mossad, because these are the guys who are actually responsible for any kind of interstate, or cross-state activities and success stories. So he was most likely, working with Israeli government, because without that, there's no way that he can make it this big so quickly. you know he definitely had Israelis reaching out to him because of his Jewish heritage. He went on to work in a bank and make it big there. Didn't make it big as a school teacher, and went on to create a, set up a career in education or schooling or anything, or teaching for that matter. Went on to work in a bank, made it super big in that bank, started his own private consulting. In a matter of years, was owning his own private island, private jet, and whatnot. So that kind of success story doesn't really come out of nowhere. There has to be an extremely powerful backing, an extremely powerful lobby that can push such a mediocre individual into that kind of success. Okay, this is not an average success story. This is a extraordinary success story, if you look at it. Now, we know when we know that a foreign government works or kind of pushes you to a certain uh, success, they expect something from you in return. It's not just, we are doing it just for the hell of it. No, that's not how it works. And given by the kind of individuals who were sided with Jeffrey Epstein over the years, we can easily deduce that this was done for two reasons. Okay, either for influence in policy making, or for, I would say, another reason, influence in policy, or for another reason that we'll get to in a minute. But before we get to that reason, let me just bring your attention to something else. Okay, something that happened in 2025. Two very major events that have happened that are somehow linked to what we are discussing right now. Okay, that those events, first and foremost, is the Iran-US conflict, which, by the way, did not happen at all. This actually was not an Iran-US conflict. This was Iran-Israel conflict. That the Prime Minister of Israel wanted US to. He was so desperate to loop US into this warfare that, you could just see it. For decades, the guy has been going on about, that Iran being weeks away from creating a nuke. Never happened. Didn't happen 30 years back. Hasn't happened till date. But yeah, that's what this incident was. Now, I would like you to just go to YouTube and maybe search for some of the clips of or tweets of Donald J. Trump, or events that happened around this entire conflict. That, US going on to bomb Fordo facility almost seems like a show. There was no harm. Iran, they moved their uranium facilities, enriched uranium to somewhere else and all whatnot. It almost seemed that it is a war that Trump didn't want in the first place. And Trump, trust me, he's a businessman. Trump is a through and through businessman. He would not do something to hurt the business. And this war was not in America's interest. It was not in America's interest by any means. So, and that's why he put up this kind of a show, Iran and both, I would say, US and Iran. And it seemed as if, he was doing it just for the hell of it. Amid all of that, Musk, another very powerful name, from in the Trump's lobby from some time back, tweets that Trump cannot say no to Netanyahu. They have him on tape. They have him on a scene. That's why he's not releasing. Very, very weird thing. Nobody even talks about it for some reason. I don't know why. But it's a big thing. Someone who's that influential, who has been so close to the Trump administration, worked within Trump administration, goes on to say something like this. The other thing that I would like you to bring your attention to is the New York mayoral candidate debate, you can say. I mean, if you look at it from an American's perspective, it's so embarrassing. I mean, there are these folks who are competing for a diplomatic position uh, in the New York city, and on the question of where would you visit, it's not even say that part of New York. They won't even answer that I'll visit that part of New York or this place, for getting some business or something. No, they say it's almost like they're competing with each other. No, I'll visit Israel first. I've already visited Israel 3 times. I'll visit Israel the fourth time, and I'll visit Israel before you do. Almost, it was very embarrassing. I mean, except for that guy Zohran Mamdani, I think the rest of them were pretty, desperate to, almost seemed as if they were trying to appease their, the Israeli counterparts. Didn't make any sense. Now, having said these things, one is only left to wonder that what exactly was the real motive behind the Israeli agencies pushing Epstein to a certain success, to uh, you know establish close ties with leading individuals in the American politics in public. Was it just influence? Was it just influence, or they did this to have some sort of uh, edge over the policymakers, over the politicians? And that is, because if you observe the way the politicians, the American politicians themselves have been behaving of late in the past about on the topic of Israel, how apologetic they have been, how how you can say desperate they have been to almost appease the Israeli agencies. It's almost it almost seems that they have him. They have these agencies have the politicians and the policymakers on some sort of chokehold, which leads us to the final plot that actually should be the case, something that every single American should pay attention to. That is that any vice of American, any politician, any policymaker should not know blackmail. That should be the plot line that the Americans should take it away from. That there should be no blackmail on American politicians despite their vices. That's the thing. Despite their vices. That's the key here. This is the key. Despite their vices. If someone within your diplomacy, someone within your politics is let's say is a pedo, is a murderer, you need to deal with them in your own way. Put them behind bars, subject them to judiciary, whatever. But that vice, that we know that he knows that his political career will be in ruins, in be in shambles if it comes out in public, that should not define his stance towards, or that should not force him to lean towards a foreign agency just because they have, they know something about this guy, and this is something that only American citizens can ensure, that there should be no blackmail on American politicians despite their vices. You have them on tape, you put them behind bars as Americans. Not these things should not be used by a foreign entity to blackmail or push them into making decisions that are against the American public in general. they should not be used by a foreign government to push the the American leaders to send American boys and men to fight a war that is not theirs to start with. So yeah, that's what I think. This is the main plot that I think we all seem to be. I mean, I'm not sure. There's some discussion around this that has been happening, since Tucker Carlson's speech. But yeah, for the most part, it's still very kept very low key for some reason. That's something I don't know why it's happening, but yeah. Anyway, share your thoughts on what do you feel about what's been going on, and we'll see you soon.